Hello, my name's Lee Jackson and this is Nick Howard. We both are consultants for Free Spirit Fishing, and we're here at the Rico show, and on a lovely Sunday morning, or it's nearly afternoon now, and a lot of people about and everything, and a little bit of history about me and how I started with Free Spirit. I mean, I go carp fishing. I've been carp fishing since Noah was around, you know. So I've seen like the early days of split cane rods, which, to be honest with you, nowadays are only any good for like growing beans up. But though there was a good rod in their time, then it progressed into the glass fibre rods, which again was very good rods for the time, but the problem is they're floppy on the rod breast and everything, never really looks nice and everything. Then it progressed to the 80s, and the carbon fibre started, you know, and a famous rod at the time, a legendary fishing rod at the time, was the Kevin Maddox KM1, sold by Simpsons of Turnford. Fantastic rod, a 12 foot, 2¼ pound test curve. But as time's moved on, lakes have got weedier and weedier, so there's been a necessity then to fish with heavier tackle, heavier line, heavier leads. So gradually the test curves, where the average test curve used to be a 2¼ now it's sort of crept up to 2¾ even 3 pound. And the one sort of drawback, those carbon rods were a revelation to carp fishing. You know, they enabled you to cast further, they was lighter, so nicer to play fish on. The one aspect that they weren't maybe so good at was that they used to soften, the blanks would soften, the glass rods used to soften. So therefore you bought a set of rods that started out life as a 2¾ or 3 pound test curve. A year later, after banging out 3 ounce leads, they've then softened to about 2½. So you've not got what you started off with. But when I started with Free Spirit, one of the breakthrough was Free Spirit was the materials used in the blank. The S range in particular is what I still use nowadays. They brought into play this low resin carbon. What that means in layman's term, basically, you know, because it's all right saying low resin carbon. What does it mean? What does it mean to a fishing rod? Well, what it means is basically that rod never softens. You know, so it starts life out as a 2¾ pound test curve rod, and then after, well, my ESs are 14 years old. They started out life as 2¾ and what you could do, you could take the rings off them, whip them back on, put new handles on them, and they'd be as good as new 14 years later. So that's pretty special for that.
To be honest, mate, you've had the British record on it. You've had fish from France.
Yeah.
They've had some stick, haven't they?
They've had some stick. You know, I put them through. I mean, to me, my fishing rods haven't necessarily got to look good. They're my tools. You know, they're my tools for the job. And another thing about the low resin carbon material, it makes feeling features a lot better. You know, I place great importance at feeling me lead down through the water and feeling it dunk the bottom to know I'm in a clear spot or not. So that's really important for my fishing. The one thing I do see though in modern day carp fishing, there's a tendency for people to there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. You know, anglers, modern day anglers are thinking, oh, you've got a nice 2¾ pound test curve rod, which is capable, an ES, which I use, is capable of fishing under your rod tips, being a nice one, or it's capable of fishing 100 yards, which for most people, 120 yards even, which for most people, in the size of the lakes they're fishing, that's perfect. But the problem you do get is then they put a so-called big pit reel on it. You know, a whacking great reel and a nice action 2¾ pound test, and it completely unbalances. So my suggestion, and that big pit reel, the name is a little bit of a misconception. I mean, the name Big Pit suggests that you can cast further. Actually, you can't. You know, the only value of a big pit reel is that it holds more line. So if you're in France or something like that, and you're boating out baits, you can get 400 metres of line on your reel. So my suggestion for like a 2¾ pound test curve rod is that you have a nice, you know, an ordinary Shimano bait runner size reel on it. You know, it won't unbalance the action of the rod. It'll still feel nice when you're playing fish, when you're casting. It'll be a nice rod to use. And another fallacy.
It helps with having the smaller reel, the size of the coils, and actually going through the bottom line.
That's right.
It helps with the casting.
That's right. I mean, another fallacy in fishing is you've got to have whacking great butt rings. I mean, the latest fashion of the last few years, you've got to have a 50mm butt ring. The problem with a 50mm butt rig, if you've got a big pit, a so-called big pit reel on there, yeah, it's throwing whacking great coils, and them coils you've got to go through a little hole. So the bigger that hole is, the less chance there is it's wrapping around the butt ring. So that's the reason why people, that's the only reason to go for a 50mm butt ring, because actually you can't cast a 50mm butt ring any further than the 50. And the problem you have with 50mm rigging, all the rings move up the rod. So what used to be a 40 now becomes a 50. What used to become a 30 now becomes a 40, and so on and so on. So the tip section, the top section of the rod, then becomes not so nice. Not so nice as with the 40mm rigging. And you can. So I mean, I see it all the time. So don't, anyone out there is not sort of brainwashed into thinking I've got to have a big pit reel, I've got to have 50mm butt rings. My suggestion is look at the rods you're using. If they're 2 3/4, 3 pound test curve, 40mm rigging is fine. A normal size Shimano bait running type reel is the perfect size to use. It will be perfect for the rod instead of a whacking great thing, that's throwing out great coils of line and everything. You're going to be tangling around the butt ring and all sorts. However, then you sort of move, as I do now. I fish lakes that occasionally I might need to be fishing in the middle, which is 160 yards. I can't do that with an ES, so therefore I have to step up a gear. So then so as well as my ESs, which I still love using, even though they're 14 years old. So a progression from that is I use IS 3.5s, 12 foot 3.5s, and that means I've got the extra casting ability. Because of the IS material is actually an iron modulus material. It's got the same properties as the S range, but because it's an iron modulus material, it enables you to cast further. There's a better recovery on tip recovery on the cast, and so therefore I've got a set of rods, 12 foot 3.5, probably the most in the tackle box where I work. That is probably the most popular rod we sell. It's probably the most popular rod in free spirited range, because you've got a fishing rod there that is capable of fishing under the rod tips, or casting 150, 160 yards in the right hands, and that's perfect for like the fishing that I'm doing at the moment, But go back to a smaller lake, my ES is fine, But again, even with the 3.5, I then don't find a necessity to use a whacking great reel on it, or again unbalance the setup, So what I use like the baby big pits, because in my opinion, on that rod, that's the perfect combination, like a baby big pit reel. I can't remember the code numbers of the Shimano code numbers, and that's perfect for the situation. And so I've got a rod that can cast 160 yards and can fish under the rod tips, and it's perfect. And like the S range, the black's not going to soften, so it's always going to be a 3.5 pound test curve. And in my mind, there's not a range of rods, like, because of the materials they're made of, to better them. Not a better carp rod in the world, that's a fact. And I'm sure Nick Nick has come on board with Free Spirit in latter years. I've been there from the start, and let's ask Nick about his experience with like what he uses for his fishing,
Yeah. Well, basically this one here, we've got the ISI VR. Basically, there is a model. This is the right one I've picked up. We've got right rack of rods here. Basically, the ISI, it's basically a stepped up version of the high-S rods, but basically what they've done with this one, the ER stands for extra responsive tip. So what I like about that is, because I like to use a rod, if I can get away, but I use the same rod for everything, so you're not confusing yourself when you're playing fish, whether you go to France, England, casting a long way, like this rod with that slightly softer tip to it. You can get a nice 1.5 ounce, 2 ounce lead, feel in control, flick it under a bush down the margin. With some other casting rods you get, they are literally just casting rods, and you lose that softness of the tip, and you're almost feel slightly out of control with lighter line. Well, not so much lighter lines, but lighter casting weights.
Yeah, and of course when you look at fish, it's not quite so nice. They're not quite nice for playing fish.
Yeah, like with this one, I've had 50s from France. We went to Le Curo, we had absolutely crazy session there. Never dropped any fish. I'm sure the softer tip helped with that, with playing the fish, no up pulls. I've gone to Birch Grove this winter. I've been catching doubles up to 34 pounders, and you know, how doubles fight, they're a bit crazy, they're no up pulls, you know, and I really think it's down to the rod. Okay, there's a bit of playing capability there, you know, there's going to be, but no, it's, you know, and to me, because I do like casting a long way, I mean, that's softer tip as well, generally fishing in meres and that as well. Having a casting rod is one thing, but to compress some casting rods, you need a lot of weight. And if I don't want to be casting a 4 or 5 ounce lead into 20 foot of silt because my rig's going to follow it. So generally, my fishing is, if I can get away with it, 2.5 ounce lead. And even though it's an Ive, and it's basically, you can cast a long way and cast a lot of weight because it's got that extra responsive tip with it. You can do pretty much anything from an ounce up to 5 ounces for long range work. But like you were saying before, balancing your setup. You know, a really nice setup with this. What I found, if I'm fishing range and you can't use shock leaders on a water, something nice 12-pound line, some of them are slightly underrated, so, and something like a 3 1/4, 3.5 ounce lead, no shock leader, and basically I can punch that as hard as I like. I've never had a crack off. You know, if I went up to 4, I'd be a bit worried about them cracks off because obviously you get the pressure of the weight. But something like that, I'm just, you know, 150 yards, it's almost like a lob. You know, it is that comfortable to cast, but you've obviously, you know, I can't say I love me margin fishing and having a rod what you're used to playing the fish on, you know, to be able to go pop, little lead under the bush, you know.
Your fishing sounds very similar to mine, the lake I'm fishing. I mean, I can't use shock leaders, so you know, therefore that's why I use the ordinary 3.5 because I don't feel, for me as a person, I can't use the ER one to its potential, you know, where I can the 3.5, you know.
Yeah, and like the other thing, like exactly what you said before, you know, it does really go on the venues. It's all right saying I want a rod that can cast to the moon and back, but if you're fishing a silty mere, for instance, you've got to have enough weight to compress the rod to get the best out of the rod. You know, you don't want to be fishing a mere with what the lead's going to pull your rig in, and like you were saying, a weedy venue, it's nice to have that bit of backbone. You know, like free spirit rods, even the casting rods, they're not pokers, but they're proper casting tools, and they're built for the job. You know, top quality carbon, and they really do what they say on the tin, don't they? Really,
so, I mean, the ES 3.5. I mean, I use it. I mean, the ERs, I haven't used them very much, but they're fantastic rods. So you've obviously got more experience with them than me. But the 3.5s, I've used them on St Lawrence River in America. You know, cast out 5-6 ounce leads when we won the World Carp Championship in 2011. Likewise, this year in 2013 in Italy on Bolsena, rowing baits out 250 metres, and you know, and so they're just a fantastic fishing rod. And
to be honest, from when I came onto Free Spirits, because obviously different companies using different rods, exactly the same setup, same line, same. Actually, the reels I took off my other rods. You know, I had a word with Pete. He's got me sorted me some ERs out. No word of a lie. Exactly the same setup, same size weight. My cast, put 35 yards, start my cast. That no change in technique. Just the way the rod casts it. And it shows you they really are tools for the job.
So I think that really the message we're saying is you know, it's about looking at the waters you're fishing. You know, if it's a normal size English lake, you know, so 10, 15 acres maybe, like the S-Rains, the ERs, would be perfect, absolutely perfect. You know, if you're fishing, but then remember to balance it with a nice size reel, not a whacking great reel on it. You don't need 50mm butt rings. Now that rod's a lovely, legendary fishing rod, you know. And then if you're fishing a pit where like I am at the moment, like Nick obviously fishes, where you have to be casting to the horizon occasionally, then in my case I use the IS 3.5. That's fine for me. And then Nick, he's a bit more, you know, better with the ER than I would be, you know. And
I suppose in a way,
and it's all about balancing your shackle, getting everything right, and looking at your own fishing, you know, what you want to do. It's all right having a rod that can fish to the horizon, but if you're fishing a 10-acre lake, you don't need it, you know. A sort of lesser test girl would be nicer to use. And in my opinion, one disadvantage with a higher test curve rod, like a 3.5, over like an ES 2 and 3. I'll play a good a lot of importance in filling my lead down through the water, filling it dump to the bottom. You know, but I find if I'm using a 2-ounce lead on an ES, I can feel it really well. But I go to an heavier test curve and you don't quite feel it as well. So
that's what I like about the ERs as well.
Yeah.
You know, extra responsive tip. Basically, it's a slightly softer tip, and it gives you drop it down, and that makes it. You know, you know what you're dropping on.
Yeah. Perhaps I'll have to get mine out of the shed and give them another go. You know, after what you're saying, because you know.
They're lovely. I get on really well.
I think it's Nick. I mean, we've hand on heart. You know, I've never used a better fishing rod in the world, you know, better carp fishing rod in the world, and long may it continue, like
but like
spirit of carp fishing.
But you know, a quick flick through some of the lengths. You know, like we do a 12'6", a 13, and to be honest, we've had a few people come today and they think, oh, I want a 13-foot rod, I want to cast a bit further. It's not always the way. Like myself, I'm so used to using 12s.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, when you look at a 13-foot, the difference really with a longer rod is you can cast it further, because you can generate. Imagine a load of skaters holding hands and skating around in a circle. The ones on the outside are going faster than the ones on the inside. So if you can, you generate greater tip speed if you can, and that's the thing. If you can, because it's okay with Mark because he can cast. Yeah, you can cast on average,
but to be honest, it's like your technique. I think from one to the other, if you're used to using, like myself, I'm used to using 12, I have to change my technique slightly. And like first outing with the 13 against my 12, I still cast further with my 12 because I'm not on it as good as you should be.
The thing as well to take into consideration is the swims you fish. You know, some swims you haven't got. In some swims, I fish, I cast further with a 10-foot rod because of overhanging trees in the swim. I haven't got the potential to use the 12-foot rod even. I mean, I use 12 foot most of the time. And another thing I find with the longer a rod is, it's more awkward it is to net a fish. You know, if you've got a 13-foot rod, you end up with it right up there. So I mean, for that reason, I use a 2-piece 8-foot handle, free spirit handle, and I've no problem. I use 12-foot rods.
But then it really goes down to, like you say, picking the right rod for the water. Because you've still got to compress that rod, and it's no good turning up and saying, okay, I've got 15-pound fluorocarbon line on. I've got a 2-ounce lead and I want to chuck it 180 yard. It ain't right.
No,
because the size lead isn't going to compress the rod.
That's right.
The line's too coily and heavy. You've got to balance your setup to get the best out of the rods, and when you do, you can really tell the difference.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, lovely to talk to you, Nick. We better get on and try and sell some of these rods, haven't we? You know.
I think we'll have coffee first.
Thank you very much for listening. We're going to have a cigarette and a coffee, like, you know.
See you soon. Thanks a lot.